you meet somebody else who has a different definition or a different threshold of what they consider a success, and they're like, "Whoa, you did this thing," and you're like, "Yeah, for me, that's nothing." You're kind of sitting there like, "Well, that's not really a success. It's kind of what I was expecting. It's the outcome I hoped for." I work with a guy that did the same course at the same uni as me, seeing where he's at and how quickly he's there compared to where I think I am now in terms of my career. I think COVID really hit us in terms of we had no knowledge pass through. Really. Like you can run a core team from a student edition that's 20 people probably if they're devoted. And you can make it happen. You can make it happen at a very, very high level. You can also run a team with 80 people as we did and not be effective at all. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Student Podcast, where I show you that you can have a financially secure life without sacrificing your creativity. And today I'm in the resort of Les Deux Alpes with my friend Paweł, who kindly invited me here. And we've just finished a week of skiing, which is absolutely amazing. I know Paweł through the Polish school. He's kind of my boss. So I hope this comes out well on him. But yeah, Paweł, what you do in life, kind of. Basically. What do I do in life? A part-time teacher, full-time actuary, semi-retired waffler, and yeah, I guess for another year retired skier up until we figure out another trip. That summarizes it all, I think. How long have you been skiing in general? It's hard to say at this stage. I think somewhere in the region of 20 years probably. I find that you progress pretty quickly. Hard to say, to be honest, because I kind of grew up with it. So it was a case of, you figure it out and then little bits and things. You don't really notice as much, I guess, when you make that progress as you do if you're kind of focused on it. What you've seen, obviously, throughout the week as well yourself, kind of going through the motions. But it's a lot different, I think, learning it, bit by bit over time as a kid compared to in such a compressed state in a week or, say, even 2 seasons worth. Yeah, I found it, really quick to learn. Because I had a good instructor. But yeah, I think just having a week of focused work, I think that just kind of applies to any skill in general. Like, I know if I just focused on marketing or whatever kind of skill in a week and just only did that, having none else on my mind, literally had none. And the only effect I have with any other activity is poetry. That was a great way to decompress after a week or two. Is it fun to teach other people the skills you're really good at? Well, really good at is very subjective. Let's start there. Yeah, no, I find it very enjoyable. In terms of the maths teaching that I do, in terms of drawing and stuff like that as well, that you get for maths. But obviously throughout this week as well, with yourself and a few other people on this trip. It's been cool to see them progress. It's been cool kind of to try to give you guys, little tidbits of information to move you all in the right direction, and then seeing you guys apply it and, seeing the happiness to be able to apply them, I think is very rewarding. So. Without falling, especially. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, well, some people fall, some people do a black after a few days of skiing, say, like me. But that was very good. And I remember you saying that you really like the kids you're teaching at the moment. And do you find that, especially in a teaching job, is it the people you work for or the people you work with kind of make the biggest difference, I think? Bit of both. I would argue the groups you work with matter more than who you're necessarily working for. So what I find really rewarding is if you have, a class that, especially considering how we run the maths classes, considering it's optional at the Leaving Cert level that I'm currently teaching, it's nice to see the groups kind of turn up and, they're kind of focused on the same thing as well. Like they know they've got exams coming up, be it the junior cert group and the leaving cert groups especially. They kind of know, what track they're on. And considering it's additional schooling as opposed to their usual kind of mandatory schooling. And there are schools, it's cool to see them take that extra day and put in the effort to cover a different subject, or in the case of maths, do a different topic, maybe out of order or something like that. So it's rewarding, I think, if you have the right group. And I think that also transfers the same way to parents, ironically enough. So having individual people who you can see are motivated and who know maybe they have certain shortcomings in terms of their skills, in terms of what they know. But at the same time, you can tell they kind of want to fix that and they want to work on that and they have, the passion behind it. I think that's probably a lot more important than who you're looking for, per se, in the case of, who's your direct boss, who's, a manager at the place you work or something like that.
But I think that specifically applies to teaching. Don't think that necessarily transfers into, other jobs, because every other kind of, if we talk about the corporate lifestyle, you're obviously starting your internship at this stage. You'll see that yourself in a little bit, but I think there perhaps it's kind of maybe the other way around, in that you see, the way that management runs things and who you're working for directly kind of impacts your work a lot more rather than necessarily who you're working with. And so that dynamic then shifts. And so it's much more important to have, somebody nice to work for, I guess. Than necessarily, colleagues who you may or may not get along with, but you don't necessarily interact with all of them all the time. So, yeah, definitely I think two different scenarios between teaching work versus non-teaching work for that.
I think that generally applies. Like, I think even just after a week or two at the internship, since you've been a teacher for quite a bit of time, because you're quite old.
Quite old.
Yeah, quite old.
Older.
Yeah. How did you find the transition from a student to a teacher back then?
It was very, I don't know. It was quite random actually. I kind of I had to fill in initially for some teachers who were kind of in narrative classes and stuff like that. So I started pretty much kind of practically leading lessons and stuff from the start. Now that was like the primary school section that we have in middle school from the second class, I think. And then we kind of gradually went up through all the classes. So I've seen kind of the entire curriculum that we do. We've changed a couple of things in the meantime. And kind of just settled into the junior/leaving cert groups, in terms of that teaching. But I don't know what was the biggest shift, to be honest. It was kind of funny going from student to co-worker with a bunch of the teachers that have been around as well with the school a while, and who I would have previously known as well as teachers, and maybe not necessarily maybe even teaching my class, but I think that dynamic was quite funny and was probably a big enough hurdle to get over. I got a few funny talking tos about, you don't have to call me Mr. or Miss anymore, like just use first names. So there's certainly some fun in that. There's also like you obviously need a bit of a gap between the age group of the students you're teaching versus the age group that you were basically friends with at the same time, especially when you're going into teaching in the same school that you've attended beforehand and things like that. So I don't think there was necessarily like that big of a jump otherwise. Like, to go from understanding a topic to being able to explain a topic, if you can help a friend, for example, with, I don't know, something in maths or any other subject, I think that same skill is then relevant when you go into teaching. So if you can explain it to your friend and they get it, and then you can do that for, a couple of people, I think you're probably also fine, teaching in class. The only thing is, like, you might have a couple of friends who think the same way as you. So perhaps you guys all approach the same problem in the same way versus, in a class you've got 20 odd, 30 odd students, and you might suddenly be approached with, 3, 4, 5 different ways of solving a problem. And so I think adaptability is very, very important in that, to be able to kind of catch on, okay, these guys are doing it this way, these guys see the problem this way. How do I kind of incorporate both, or how do I kind of leverage both to be able to explain the topic to them? But yeah, I don't think it's as massive of a jump. I think there's definitely a bit of a skill set that you kind of either have or you don't have. And some things you can definitely learn, how to approach a topic, what to explain step by step. But I think the idea of how you kind of lead a class and what comes of it is something that you kind of just have to have as a skill.
Yeah, I've learned that like first impression of the class is definitely important, because my fourth classers, maybe I still wasn't a bit strict enough, so it kind of got a bit too rowdy. But like compared to like other colleagues like Alex, like with 4A, you can be like quite strict and they listen to him a lot more, but I guess they like me more.
Yeah, and that's a balance, isn't it?
Yeah, because then they'll enjoy maths kind of more, and they say science is their favorite subject. I've heard them saying geography is their favorite subject, history.
Exactly. So you're playing, devil's advocate at some stage. Sometimes you have to give them a little bit of leeway to get them to enjoy the subject.
And as you progress like through the different classes, did you find yourself adapting your teaching style a lot?
Yes, yeah, definitely. Everything in kind of the earlier classes that we did, so fourth class, I'd say, till about kind of first year, second year, I would argue probably first year, is a lot more kind of, you want to go through a topic, but you want to go through and explain a bit of theory, and, you want to do a few practice questions and things like that, but you generally want to like gamify it and keep the atmosphere kind of loose, and you're not really as focused. And then when you get to kind of second year and people are split into higher level classes, ordinary level classes, now at that point they kind of have, an inkling of like, okay, well now it's getting kind of serious. Same thing again when you get to third year. At that point they realize, okay, well now we've got exams. They may not be the most important exams that we're going to sit, but they're still somewhat important. They kind of, they set you up for what you're going to do with the cert. So you want to do quite well at that. And I think especially going towards leaving certs, like the leaving certs at this stage, the group I have this year, like they're driving me essentially into what they want to do. They've told me, okay, we want to do this and this topic in the last couple of weeks before mocks, because there's a vast majority of questions asked, a variety of questions in, say, I don't know, the circle or something like that. And like, can we do a worksheet on that and just go through, a bunch of that? So they themselves kind of figure out, okay, well, we've done a bunch of theory and we covered a bunch of topics in, say, the first half of the year, but then seeing them themselves come up with, okay, well, now we just want to do like, a load of practice on this topic. And then from that, essentially look at, okay, well, we have issues with this or that, or we're missing theory here. And then we can kind of fill in those gaps. So yeah, I think there's a lot more kind of focused work going on, obviously in the older classes. And I think you can go towards a lot kind of higher level, not necessarily higher level in terms of like maths higher level and ordinary level as a subject, but more so like higher level thinking in terms of even up to junior cert, you kind of study a subject, but you kind of study it to know the stuff. And for leaving cert, there's a lot more cool discussions that I have with students where you're just chatting about the theory to chat about the theory. And you can see kind of, them putting two and two together in their head on how things work, on why certain things are happening in a question, on how to approach a random question that they've never seen before. So it's a lot cooler to have, those sort of students as well in those classes. But I think that only really ever comes when you kind of work with the leaving cert class. Personally, haven't seen that kind of come up much in junior cert classes, and especially not in primary school, because we're not that stage yet. Just kind of learning the basics to know the basics. But yeah, and I think that's part of it as well. What makes the teaching in the leaving cert groups more enjoyable is that you have those, random conversations of like, hey, what's the purpose of calculus or something like that, and it's kind of random, but you go through those topics and you kind of have those chats, and then they're like, yeah, okay, now I know what's going on. Yeah, so you definitely know that.
Yeah, it's a bit different. It's more so like they'll tell me what's going in their life more so.
Exactly.
Yeah, and look what I'm at.
Exactly. You have live chats though with the students as well. It's good to see kind of what state people are in and stuff. But yeah, in terms of teaching, I think that's really the major turning point. You can go from more so game stuff and like, cool worksheets and things like that to straight up just pure theory, and the levels of discussions that you're having with them are just so different. That's one of the most fun parts for me.
I guess there's kind of like a U-shaped kind of engagement level. It's fourth class, fifth class, maybe sixth class, they're really engaged.
Yeah.
They're really enjoying it. Once you get to like first year, and then like up to maybe second year, third year, sometimes like they're not really as engaged. Then you get like to leave 100%. Oh, they top on. Like
there's also going to be some students who, don't need to be the best at maths. Like they're going to go on and do great things in other subjects or outside of school or whatever. Like, just because, they're doing an extra day of school with the public school, or even in like the regular schools in our school, like it's, you don't have to be a whiz at everything. That's the main thing. As long as you know the basics of enough stuff to understand how the world works around you, I don't think there's a need to push everyone to do wild things.
And then you're also, like me, the manager of the school shop.
Yes, back in the day.
Yeah, Japanese cool stories. This I've had a few. I've already told you.
Cool stories. I think one of the coolest moments was actually like initially we kind of got put together into this project kind of randomly. Like we were the first group that was big enough in the Polish school essentially to have like a TY program. And so we decided, okay, let's do the equivalent of like a TY mini company, but let's make it run the entire school year. And that then kind of snowballed into literally us just running it for the entirety of TY through sixth year. And then we kind of, roped in more students as they got to that level. But I think one of the coolest stories is probably like initially I kind of got selected to lead that team kind of randomly. It wasn't necessarily that I really wanted to, I think, but it kind of fell into my lap and I went with it. And I think the coolest moments were like when we were starting off, and initially we got, I don't know, €100 or something worth of a loan to kind of start off and buy some stuff and create some efforts and things like that to entice people towards this. But we absolutely sold out, I think, within 2 weeks, everything that we bought for the opening. And I think at that point, the realization was like, okay, well, this was kind of a random project, but it actually worked pretty well. Obviously, throughout the time as well that we ran that, we tried a whole bunch of stuff in terms of, what do we actually sell, and do we do promos, do we not do promos, various things like that. That was cool to see as well, just to kind of feel out the market, I guess, in terms of what people wanted, or more likely what they didn't want, because a lot of the stuff we ended up axing and it never made it to the light of day in any grand scale. Yeah, fruit and veg, upon parents' requests, was included for a while, but didn't really go far. But yeah, it was. I think it was a really cool development. We developed a whole bunch of very basic, but I guess systems that we then kind of got used to as well in the business side. We had a very basic, but we did have an accounting system. We looked at who was in and out in terms of any sort of money that we were able to split from that project and things like that. So I think it was cool just to kind of go through the motions and figure all that out ourselves as well, and then see like, okay, well, this is how it works, in the real world. In fairness, some of the stuff wasn't too far off. But as well, yeah, it was just a random experience, I guess, to start us off.
And I have to find managing everybody.
I'd probably be more strict with people, and I also probably wouldn't push certain people enough in that scenario. But it was a cool learning experience. I think it was cool, kind of filtering out who you could give more meaningful roles to. And then from that, based on that, saying, okay, like this person's actually pulling their weight, this person's doing that, this person's handling this side, this person isn't doing what they should be. I think the most random experience that we had as a result of that whole like pretend running a business scenario was having to fire someone because they simply just didn't do the stuff they had to do.
Oh, so my sister's not the first person to fire someone.
So no, not by any means. That person in particular didn't last too long. But yeah, like and it's just all those random experiences. And the fact as well that we effectively ran that over a couple of years. So we got to run this experiment rather than like a TUI mini company. You kind of just do it over a couple of weeks or even a couple of days sometimes. The fact that we got so much exposure to it and we saw all the issues develop, and then we saw, the stagnation of the shop, and then we had to reinvent it. And, we had one place that we were getting supplies, and then that wasn't working out because whatever, we couldn't get deliveries or we were getting random other stuff, or there was a shortage of whatever we wanted to buy. So just going through all of that and kind of making yourself aware of, hey, these are the issues that a business can have, I think was really cool, just to see all that. And, yeah, experience it without any major risk. I mean, at that stage, if we didn't make any money, it didn't really hurt us because we're still students.
And was the management more centralized, or was it kind of distributed?
Initially, we started off, it was quite centralized. I mean, there was only like 3 to 5 of us, I think, initially that kind of ran the whole thing. I want to say there's 3 of us that actually started it, and then it kind of grew. Then it kind of got more involved. Eventually, we had about, I want to say, like 8 to 10 people, perhaps, altogether. And at that stage, I think we've worked it out. At that stage, we had, a dedicated head of finance, a vice president, I guess, if you want to call it that, or a second in command. And at that stage, we had, that trio, and that trio would be making, myself included, some of those decisions in terms of where do we want to go. Do we need to get rid of certain people? Do we need to hire someone on? That sort of stuff. So all those decisions at that stage were kind of, shared and grouped up. I would still probably say I had a strong word to put into that discussion, but generally also we would be in agreement. It was very rare though that we'd have, massive chat with the whole team or anything like that. There wasn't really any need to. It really was kind of alone in terms of what we're doing. But yeah. So I guess it started off centralized. It probably didn't end up that way because we had more of the 3 Musketeers scenario running the place.
I found it was in my first year of the shop. It was less centralized, and there was 3 of us. One was doing the account. I was bringing home the money box, and I don't know, kind of being the front face maybe, and then another person was buying stuff. Mm-hmm. So that just complicated everything. And I found that in the second year, I was like so much easier because I was doing everything. Mm-hmm. I was terrified when one of the Musketeers told me he was leaving, and then the other one was already did their leaving search. So okay,
yep.
And it's like, oh fuck, I'm not going to be able to do this. And it's like, turns out it's actually not that bad, and it worked.
It does simplify some things. Yeah, having control is nice, but at some stages, I think, especially if you're growing a business or something like that, it's it's a case of eventually you can't hold on to all the strings because you're not going to be able to pull them all at the same time, or you'll miss one that needs to be pulled when it should be pulled. So at the same time, I think yeah, like look, that's it's a small scale compared to everything else. So it was very doable to run that single handedly essentially. And I definitely agree that there were situations where it was a lot easier. I found that personally myself as well. It's preparing initially the finances and stuff myself, and also getting the stock in place. That was probably a lot easier to do individually than when we split that up as well. But at the same time, it was cool to see, how that developed when we did split up. It was just another cool experience.
And did it give you any kind of interacting of what job you want to do, like with the actuary?
Not in particular, I don't think. No, I don't think there was anything wildly transferable. Aside from like, look, basic, like you got to be kind of, hopped on a bit. You got to look at the amount of stuff you have. You got to keep track of what you've sold, how much you've sold, what you want to buy. You got to, figure out, okay, if there's something that's going to go out of stock probably next week because we've had high demand for it the last 2 weeks, well, then we might as well stock up ahead of time because, it might not come at the next delivery for the shop that we're actually buying it from. So various things like that. Like, I think that's the only real kind of transferable skill. Like, sure, I did a little bit of accounting in Excel, but that's nothing compared to the actual work I do now. So, don't think that was wildly transferable. I'm not a manager yet, so I don't think any managerial skills were transferable, to be honest. The only thing it did teach me actually a little bit of is when we went into college then afterwards, and I did another project about forming a student, and was the vice captain there for a year. That's maybe where I guess some of the kind of teamwork / management side of things kind of helped. But again, it's also small scale that it's kind of it's, as I said earlier, like it's kind of play pretend. It doesn't have any major consequences if the project goes bust.
Did you get kind of enjoyment when all the kids lined up for a pizza?
Kind of. I mean, it was cool to see, like, we'd try something and it would stick and people would like it. And I think opening up, some of those options was a cool way to kind of feel out where the market was. So, yeah, I mean, I guess so. It was cool to see that, the effort that we're putting in is something I guess that all the students want, like also the teachers.
Since you've studied through COVID, probably affected you a lot more differently than me having COVID affecting me in the second and third year and fourth year.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself comparing yourself to kind of, let's say, the years that didn't kind of go through COVID? Do you think, what way did that change you?
Yeah, I think so. I work with a guy that did the same course in the same uni as me, and seeing where he's at and how quickly he's there compared to where I think I am now in terms of my career, I think there's definitely quite a comparisons there. For myself, like got through half of first year, the first lockdown, and then we kind of did second year all online, and it was kind of trash because it was all just pre-recorded lectures. You kind of never saw anybody. You'd have a random call or a group project or something here or there. So there was bits and things that you'd kind of do, but at the same time, like I don't think it definitely wasn't the same. And I think returning to college then in 30 was nice because I think it got everybody back together a bit. It was kind of funny, I think, 30 as well, because we still we had lectures in person, but then we had the final exams online. That was kind of weird, but aside from one particular one. So that was kind of a weird hybrid scenario. But yeah, fourth year, I think coming back fully kind of on campus, I think that was nice. We had all the hard modules, but at the same time, like you kind of felt like, okay, here's the class group. All the group projects and stuff happened in person a lot more. And that was a lot better, I think. But yeah, comparing to pre and post COVID, I think there's definitely like even the guy I'm talking about, like it's a case of I think he was in fourth year when COVID hit. So nobody really kind of had the stuff prepared in a video form. So they like all the lectures and stuff still happened live. And then they were recorded. And then the next year kind of all the professors were like, I'm recording this from last year. Here's the videos, guys. I think that was absolutely shocking in terms of teaching because you never felt, connected to the stuff you're actually trying to learn. Did it have an impact? Yeah, I think so. I don't know how much of it is just down to the, I guess, way that things were taught in general and the college experience, but also probably down to how we as students or anybody that kind of same range time frame who went through that college experience, how we kind of changed over that time from having been even students who, you're in school every day, you go and do your homework and, it's kind of nice and consistent and it was all in person, to going to a completely digital experience, a completely foreign experience, and then kind of being spat out at the end of it, kind of like, here, go work. So yeah, it was weird. Yeah, strange experience.
And did you do the Formula One during COVID as well? Somehow?
From a student, we ran that. Yeah, kind of. I applied to that actually in first year, literally like I think it was like Freshers Week or something. And a friend of mine actually saw a poster or something for it, and we were just sitting chatting because we had like a whole bunch of hours free that day. It was literally like 2 lectures, I think, that day or something. And so we're just chatting around, sitting around, chill for some lunch or something. She mentioned like, oh, I signed up to this. Signed up there and then for like an interview with the then I think mechanical captain or something in like an hour's time, and I walked into that. Chatted to the guy and I was like, here's, I've done this stuff in secondary school. I did a whole bunch of various projects, yeah, robotics, yeah, to CANSAT and stuff like that. So a lot more kind of engineering focused compared to the Actuary route I chose. But yeah, that's I think where it realistically started. Obviously, we got some of the experience in person then in first year. We went into COVID. Everything kind of stopped, I guess. It didn't really happen first year. Then we kind of said, okay, well, then we'll go for next season, just continue development. Then that kind of rolled over. Then we figured out that actually we're not going to have the sponsorship and the support from the college and stuff in second year. So then that kind of fell apart. And then you kind of got to third year and, people got back on campus. And we got some support from the college. So it was nice, but not much, not enough anyway to get the project over the line at that stage. But yeah, I mean, it did exist, I guess. It just wasn't the same. Like, you know yourself, if you tried to run a project, bear in mind, like, this team's like between 30 and 80 people at any given time. So like this is obviously it fluctuates with how many people are actually doing work. It fluctuates with year to year as well. Like you can run a core team for a Formula student competition that's 20 people probably if they're devoted. And you can make it happen. You can make it happen at a very, very high level. You can also run a team with 80 people as we did, or 70 something people as we did in third year when I was vice captain, and not be effective at all because we got nowhere. No car was built. No funding was raised, and we kind of felt defeated after that as well. But I think COVID really hit us in terms of we had no knowledge pass through, really. All the good people that were kind of, in their fourth year, or fifth year, sixth year, perhaps masters in engineering as well. All those people that were there before COVID, we practically had none of those when we got back after. And it was really kind of, stumbling through all of the hurdles. But we got there, and the team's actually relatively successful nowadays. It's still taken a few years, obviously, to develop since I was there. But considering the car was quite a challenging build, it was a high voltage electric car that we straight up decided to build. Formula student kind of has two classes, combustion engine and electric. So obviously the College of Electrical Engineering in UCD was not too chuffed to hear that we were building a big ass battery, and we wanted to zap some stuff. So that's where, some support was needed. It seems like the team is getting that, anyways, from what I follow from the few people that I know. It seems like, the project is moving in the right direction.
Have you seen it impact social skills a bit?
I think so. I think there was a few people that never known that they would get punched in the face. They said certain things when we were all online, and there were a few people that were ridiculously abrasive when you get back into college afterwards. For the student or otherwise, but no, also like it kind of sucked because you go into college, you knew a few people in the first semester, and you kind of never made friends with the rest of your class group, and then all of a sudden you're in third year, and the modules are hard, and you're in high level stats and random calculus and things like that, and kind of need to work on all of it at the same time, and you've got 4 group projects with random people you've never heard of or never seen in lectures and stuff, and trying to figure out who they are. So, I think it definitely did. I think personally as well. It was probably tough seeing none of that interaction for that long, and then kind of going into the workplace, and especially going into the workplace digitally for me, like working remote and stuff. You never kind of have that. But I guess as well, going back through the school and grounds and everything like that, it's kind of helped build that up. So yeah, it's been nice. And I'd say there's been some kind of recovery effect in there, but definitely had an effect.
Do you think it's worth it for all the convenience kind of of working from home? Just not being in the office that much?
It depends on your scenario. If you live 10-15 minutes from the office, why not? Especially if you can get either public transport or you can cycle as you do and stuff like that, walk even better. And if it's a case of, you have a half-hour drive and it turns into an hour with traffic and all of a sudden you're driving 50 kilometers and stuff like that, probably makes more sense to be working remote. If you have a lot of spare time and you're already active socially, kind of in sports groups or things like that, or you've a vibrant friend group. I don't think it really impacts your work at all if you're working remote. I think it's very easy to also get pigeonholed into your own little space, your own little existence. And I think I felt that as well, considering working remotely 5 days a week. And I guess working at the school is kind of our release in that sense, because obviously you're seeing a bunch of the likes of you that I've worked with, and a bunch of the students obviously as well. So that's kind of cool. But outside of that, it's very easy to get pigeonholed. Definitely, like myself, even giving friends and stuff. If you're sitting through a workday, facing the screen the entire time, and then you're chatting to a few people through the screen, but still it's somewhat limited. That definitely does have an effect as well. So yeah, I mean, if you have the means, then it's easy enough for you to get into the office. Probably do. I think a lot of companies are pushing for hybrid working at this point anyway. I don't think remote is going to last too long. I say I'm one of the lucky few that still have full remote privileges. We'll see how long that lasts. I don't predict it'll be forever.
Yeah, and I say I'm gonna come into the office every day because I don't have the most active social life at the moment, except going to school. So it's kind of a lot better and just half an hour cycle. Even if I'm Dublin, dodgy road, that they're building more cycle lanes, but I'd rather have a quality road. Rather have a better quality road.
Despite that's so lethal.
So the office is a lot better. Plus, you have the free coffee.
Yes, free coffee. Especially
they free coffee there.
In the case of an Italian company, having a nice espresso machine is what gets me through the day.
Yeah. Or if you have a barista.
Exactly. That's even
better. I think that's a golden handcuffs. And then, what do you like your work? I know that's a fun question, but
what do I like my work? It's relatively varied. You might think somebody who deals with numbers as an actuary, who kind of does a bunch of statistical work and all that, and kind of think, oh, Excel, boo boo. But I've been working, going on 3 years at this stage, just under 3 years, two-thirds, I'd say, maybe at this point. I don't think I've repeated a single task. Aside from like some basic stuff like, okay, you need to fill out a form to, get something through or whatever, things like that. Everything that I've worked on, like project work-wise, has all been very, very different. Going from like data preparation stuff to then figuring out how modeling works and how you use specific software and, understanding kind of at a higher level, what goes wrong with a statistical model and how you kind of develop a statistical model step by step. And that was a cool discovery. And, you're thrown in a different project and then maybe you're doing, I don't know, an evaluation of a previous modeler or trying to understand kind of what's going wrong with a client base. All of it, I think, has been quite varied. Recently, I was on a very, very long project, which I'm quite glad to be off of. But quite a long project that I can't talk too much about. But let's just say I was stuck kind of again in the one realm, I guess, for a long, long time. It was still quite varied in that there was quite a lot of problem solving at very different levels, from the basics of like, hey, your data is wrong, to stuff like, oh, hey, we actually messed up something in this analysis, and then we got to go back and figure out where it went wrong and fix it, check it again. So stuff like that, I think is very cool to see. And considering I've been there about 3 years, to see that there's still variety and there's still new stuff down the line, I think is very important.
Would you recommend going into the actuarial kind of that path? There's a lot of exams they have to go through.
Yes, the actuarial path, you've got to have passed higher level maths at a H1, H2 level, got to help you. And if you've done other kind of STEM subjects, they will help probably. You got to love your maths. You got to be very, very attentive to stuff. There's a million ways that anything and everything can go wrong. What sort of work? It's quite interesting work. In terms of, you don't really, it also depends on the company, from what I've heard. But in my case, it's quite varied. You get to do quite a lot of things that maybe aren't necessarily traditionally actuarial work as well. So a lot of stuff that you'll learn in terms of, you'll need your coding skills. You'll need to have a bit of analysis. You'll need to have a lot of, general kind of cop on in terms of, does this make sense at a overview kind of level? Does what I'm doing give me answers that, actually represent what the market wants or stuff like that? So those sort of skill sets are really what you need. That dedication, that passion, the STEM skills, which you're not going to get around. And in terms of the exams, like mental fortitude, they're absolutely insane to get through. I've taken a few stabs at them. Progress is yet to be made. However, there's a lot of exams, and to get through them, I think, is a test of Are you willing to jump through the hoops? If you are, you get rewarded handsomely. It's quite nice. It's generally quite nice work to do. The people you work with also a lot of the time are generally quite nice. There's, you typically have people who are like-minded, so it's very hard to kind of, from what I've heard, it's very rare that you kind of end up in a situation where you're really kind of working for an asshole as a manager or something like that. And obviously there are certain cases, I have heard of a few. However, that said, in general, you're working with very like-minded people, and so if you see, eye to eye on a lot of stuff, it's a lot easier to also just get along, just do your thing, get the work done.
I remember you telling me a few days ago that AI would really impact your job.
Yeah.
Talk about like why AI will not affect our artists in the way they think. What would be your case against like AI because it's just a lot more sadistic.
Yeah, exactly. Currently, I think AI is not at the point where you can really give it a whole bunch of data and maths and logical arguments and combine all that in a way that makes sense. Be it in a very structured way or be it in a holistic way. And issues there, okay, if you have, let's say, a very structured thing, well, of course you can automate that. That's good. That's exactly what we want. But also, you need somebody who understands what that pipeline and all of those things are supposed to do. So you're not really going to get rid of an actuary straight away, because you need someone to make sense of this stuff, and then you need someone that adapts that stuff. Obviously, you're going to leverage, machine learning models and artificial intelligence in general, I guess, and kind of having, people that handle data and stuff like that, so data scientists, I guess, included in that circle is good. But I don't think it get across the entirety of what an actuary can do in terms of having that, that higher level thinking, in terms of being able to go from, okay, well, I'm getting a bunch of spreadsheet figures here. Here's a couple of percentages, and what does that mean, real world impact wise? There's also certain things that I don't think are easily quantifiable. There's, I've made the joke that it's kind of you're kind of predicting by magic certain things, but you kind of are, because certain things, you have to just take a guess on. Certain things you have to take a stance on in the absence of data or having data on hand. There are certain things, if regulations are going to come through, if the market's going to go one way or the other, you might think that, you're competitive in a market segment or something like that. And then all of a sudden, you run an experiment, with your pricing, and you check something against the data that you have, and all of a sudden it turns out that no, actually that doesn't make sense, and then you have to figure out why. It's not always obvious why those things happen. There's still, we will definitely get to a point where AI can pass the exams and be a qualified actuary. Will it do the work that a qualified actuary does? Probably not. We're already at a level where certain AIs can pass the CFAs, I think, up to a certain point. And again, do they know everything about that topic? Probably not. Do they know the majority, or can they give you a sense that they know enough? Yeah, because clearly they're passing the exams. So it seems like that's possible. But again, does that kind of cover everything that you can do? Probably not. There's still that human touch. I think that's needed. Either way, I'd argue that your poetry is a lot harder to poetry and art in general. I think is a lot harder. Anything to do with major culture, music included, I guess, is a lot harder to replace via AI than anything that's in any way structured. But I think we're still a good ways yet from replacing highly specialized jobs.
It's all like very shallow understanding.
It's predicting what you wanted to say, right? Especially in the case of LLMs and things like that. Like, it's, it can read a question and it can give you a paragraph on the topic, but will it be able to answer a random case study that seems to contradict everything you know? Maybe not. And that's the point where, you as an actuary, or anybody in any field, where things stop making sense. Sometimes that's where you need to figure things out with imperfect info. And that's where I think it kind of falls apart.
Yeah, it's all just an if-then machine.
Yeah.
That just
bunch of if statements.
Actually understand. I read a book that I told you about, Primal Intelligence.
Yep.
And the guys explain neuroscientist Angus Fletcher, who they're weak taking the story because this causes this, but an AI machine just sees if 2 + 2 and 4.
Give answer 4, exactly.
Yeah.
So there's no context, there's no nuance to it.
Yeah. So I'm not really worried, and I think maybe it's not a bubble completely, but on some level there's actually going to be damage.
Yeah. Agreed.
most of them select it.
I think all of the basic stuff that's done, stuff like data entry, things like that. I think that stuff is going to get automated out very quickly, and already is actively being essentially can handle the workforce. It's going to be interesting to see how things happen there. Obviously, there's a lot of the manual tasks that need doing that robots can't yet do because we simply don't have the right robots to handle that, which Elon Musk apparently is recently going to be trying to take care of because he's asking Tesla's production to start producing more robots from what I've heard. But still, I think, yeah, so a lot of the manual stuff, a lot of like the trades and things like that are fairly secure probably for the moment. I think art is going to be hard to replace, and I'm somewhat hopeful. But yeah, some of those kind of specialized tasks that certain qualified, restricted, I guess, kind of professions hope.
Yeah, especially once you're past entry level.
Yep.
Because, AI art is basically slop. So,
Yep.
Once you get past a certain level, I'm not sure if I'm past that level, maybe I am. So hopefully that works out. And come back to Poland. We're both at Bologna Camp, which is a very nice kind of party thing. And then
A youth dance sport event
yeah,
to unify Polish youth from around the world. Yes.
yeah, it's around a very specific shop, very specific,
Very specific, yeah, very specific shop.
very
Folk shop.
yeah, a tiny little shop that handled 1,000 students' requests. But you were later on asked to join, selected to join the Youth Polonia Council,
Yes.
which kind of consults with the Senate, the Marshal of the Senate. Did you expect to be selected when you applied?
Not particularly. I think a lot of the people that ended up in that group on that board, I guess, in that group of 16, have a lot different positions than I was expecting to see. In terms of, they're all kind of in politics or they all have connections in terms of youth groups and things like that. And it's kind of weird entering that whole world as someone who's basically, just involved via teaching, I guess. So it was a completely different context for me to see that. That's what I think was very useful because we had a whole bunch of conversations with various groups and people representing various countries, and they're saying like, oh, how do we include, young people and how do we kind of spread the culture and the heritage and things like that, and kind of just general knowledge. And I guess the hype of like, hey, you have Polish roots as well, so be proud of them and things like that. And it was cool to see, them have some of the problems that we would have had, but also that we've solved by running the school, by having all the events, by doing all the things. So it was cool to share that. Yeah, it was definitely unexpected in terms of getting selected for it. Thought there would be probably more other people as well that would be more qualified for the position, but it's an incredible one, and it's been incredibly cool so far. We flew out to Warsaw, for a couple of days, met with the Senate representatives and everything like that. It was incredibly cool to get to meet everyone, and it's also incredibly cool to see that despite the fact that we all live in very different countries, politically and economically, like that doesn't really matter, but in terms of any aspects and geographically as well, halfway across the world for some people, from Australia all the way to the west coast of the US, all the way around. But it's incredibly cool to see that despite all those differences, despite all the weird experiences that each of us have had, we still share some issues that we can solve in the same ways. And I think that's been the highlight so far, that there's many things that we share in terms of those troubles, in terms of the ways that, we feel about certain things, the way that I guess we approach certain topics. So yeah, that's been incredibly rewarding so far.
That really relates kind of to David from Bologna Camp as well.
Mhm.
And he has a foundation You'd Be On Board Susie's, who's only kind of starting.
Mhm.
But he kind of relates that to as well, that we can travel the world and we kind of still experience the same stuff. So it's always really cool in that way that like, oh yeah, actually I'm not struggling.
Yeah, there's that human connection, but there's also that, shared, I guess, Polish connection in terms of, well, that was the point of the event, right? To get all those people with Polish heritage together, have them have those chats. I think to a very high extent, probably it has achieved the initial goal. So it'll be cool to see what round two brings. We'll be consulting, hopefully make it a better event. But yeah, overall, I think it was very positive.
It just shows you what Polish people are like. Because I never expected that people from Brazil would be not so much in the Polish school aspect.
Exactly.
So in the dancing,
But
like
the culture is mad.
yeah, and it's like, oh, actually, Poland is not just the church, the schools,
The
and
language.
maybe a Polish shop.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
actually just so much broader. And I was like,
So
okay, thank God that there's so many avenues that were
Yeah.
diversified in that way. So I think maybe you'd agree that kind of maybe in the next 20, 50 years, we've had the astronaut in space, maybe kind of like Irish people, to be honest, like the diaspora.
Yeah, very, very possible.
And my last question to you is we have a tradition where each guest leaves a problem they're kind of dealing with. For next guest, they don't know who they're leaving it for.
Mhm.
So, David's question from Bologna Camp is what is success for you in life?
Oh, so how you quantify success, I guess, is the problem, right? That's a very good question to ask. We've got all our beautiful metrics, right? As an actuary, you'd expect me to tell you all the numbers. I think realistically that still holds some bearing of truth in terms of where you expect, success to be. It's cool to see, kind of progress in terms of career. It's cool to see progress in terms of all the measurable things. But I think also success is whatever makes you happy in a way, as cheesy as it sounds. But it's good to see, okay, hey, I've, a group of friends that I've brought skiing. That's been fun. And I think that's a success. Or one person, nobody was majorly into it. So that's also a success. So yeah, all those things, like, it's cool, I think, to also look at all of that stuff, because I think we tend to forget all of the stuff that we do. And I'm personally definitely guilty of that as well myself, to not value all the little stuff that I think counts as, little successes. And it's kind of weird as well. You have that kind of cultural clash, I guess, in terms of you meet somebody else who has a different definition or a different threshold of what they consider a success. And they're like, whoa, you did this thing. And you're like, yeah, but for me, that's nothing. You're kind of sitting there like, well, that's not really a success. It's kind of what I was expecting. It's the outcome I hoped for, and kind of didn't think there was anything else possible really aside from, hey, this is going to happen. So I think that is incredibly powerful to sometimes think about. That it's easy for us to set a very high bar for whatever. It doesn't really matter whether it's academically or in terms of anything, career progression, whatever. It doesn't matter. But it's very easy for us to kind of set impossible standards for ourselves and then never meet them and then never really be happy with some of the stuff that we do. But at the same time, it's probably easy to just kind of reframe that and see, like, hey, I did this thing. That's actually quite good. I maybe didn't give myself enough credit for it, but I've got this far and this worked out, and I did this and I got through this exam, and then I don't know, I did something else, and that's, I think, the measurement of success that we try to strive for, not only just the metrics. So
I thought with my book, I think that was like, oh yeah, like I tell people, oh, I've published two books. Oh yeah, sure, they're self-published, but I still published two books.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, that's the big thing.
Yeah,
that's the thing you consider a success, but then I write on, and then that's the little thing.
Exactly.
Because I have that just tiny little moment where I play with the words just right, and it's like I perk up.
That's what leads to a big success.
Yep.
So and again, and you're kind of, you might be writing a poem, and you might be like, oh, I wrote a poem, and then you're like, oh, well, I've actually written X amount of them, and now I have a whole book of them. That's what I mean. Yeah. So at that rate, like, it's it's a case of understanding everything around you that you can kind of treat as a success. I also think the converse is very painful to be kind of met with, in terms of, if you have a very low bar for what you consider a success, I think that's also very damaging. So yeah, you can't consider everything a success, because some of the stuff you should kind of expect of yourself. And I think those standards also matter. But there's a good mix somewhere in the middle, where, things that are actually successes, you treat them as successes, and things that are just kind of run of the mill, things that have to happen, are the things that kind of just count as, okay, well, that's it. So yeah, you got to be well calibrated.
And learn that to skiing. You should say the bar of success as your ski snot and flipping. You be the first one of the day out of nowhere. If you count the success as doing this black without falling, even if it was very slow-ish, compared to
the competitive space is competitive pace with the glaciers moving up there. I think you had him beat, but just marginally.
I really want to thank you again for taking me on this trip and then having this conversation with you. Got to learn a lot of stuff from this. Thanks for being a good enough boss. Yeah,
Very welcome. Don't ask for a raise anytime soon.
you're not the head of finance. I'll answer
I'm not. I'm not.
I'll answer
I'm
I'll
not.
answer
Yeah.
And to you all, I'll see you all in 2 weeks because my meeting is still okay. Bye.
There's